everyone, and thanks for joining us. And tonight, Suzy and I are talking about after disclosure. What then? That's a big question, isn't it, Suzy?
It certainly is. Yeah. It's daunting.
Tonight, folks, while we're still in pause mode with the restrictions, we thought it's a good time to have a look at where we are in our discussions about extraterrestrial life and start some dialogues that might leverage a bit of change to our thinking and approach in our UFO community to the UFO subject. So I'm joined tonight by New Zealand UFO researcher, author and experiencer Suzy Hansen, who many know is well known to many in Brisbane and Sydney in Australia, to the members and visitors to our public meetings. And some of you might have even seen some of the Zoom casts Suzy and I have recorded on various subjects in recent times. And for those who haven't, you can find them on the UFO Research Queensland YouTube channel, where this live stream will eventually be posted too, and in case you want to refer back to it. And I'll post the link in the comments when we finish up tonight. And also, if you missed our last live stream, I think it was 2 weeks ago, with Dr. Gemma Regan, then you can also go to our YouTube channel and find that's posted there too. So thanks for joining me, Suzy.
You're welcome, Sheryl. Nice to talk with you again.
Yes, we seem to do talk a lot, that's for sure.
We do.
Hang on. So now let me start off. I know you're 2 hours ahead in New Zealand, so we'll hopefully not keep you up too late, although you know how it is with this subject. We can speak about it for hours. Mm-hmm. So everyone, I've asked Suzy to join me tonight for the very reason that she is a UFO researcher and is it director or administrator, Suzy, for UFocus?
Founding director.
Founding director, okay, for the UFocus organisation in New Zealand. And like me, Suzy spent a few too many decades in the UFO field. But when you spend years in this field, you often find your explorations overflow from the usual suspects of the data, the sightings, the close encounter reports, the cover-up, the political implications of extraterrestrial life, and they sort of flow over into the sociological, the psychological, and the cultural implications of extraterrestrial existence, I should say, which play a huge part in the human response to ETs, but are rarely discussed. So let's jump in right there, Suzy. If I may, I'll kick us off with the first thought that disclosure about extraterrestrial existence will depend on what drives it. Actually, you might like to have a go at that first while I continue sharing a little bit. Okay,
just repeat the question again, because the sound isn't too good coming in at this time of night.
Sure. Well, I was just saying the disclosure about extraterrestrial existence will depend on what drives that disclosure.
Yes, well, the UFO field, or certain members of the UFO field for years have been pushing for disclosure now, but I have always held the belief, along with a few others in the field, that it would take a long time and that it is necessary for it to take a long time. And I describe in my speeches and in my book why I feel this is the case. So, you know, I think there's multiple things driving disclosure at the moment, but I've also found, traveling overseas and speaking, that disclosure means a lot of different things in different countries. And what the US sees as UFO disclosure can be somewhat different to what people in other countries feel about it, and it's not always quite as high on the priority list in some countries as it is in the States. I think disclosure in the States is very closely tied to political and military concerns. In other places, it's driven by a desire to know the truth and know the facts. And I think that there are now other drivers coming into play concerning technology, concerning secret technology, technology that we want released or that we want to know about. And of course, at the moment, we're having our freedoms curtailed somewhat. And sometimes this can be a real driver of the, what you might call the, not fringe, but those aspects of urgency within the UFO field in particular, because that's what we're talking about just at the moment. So go on, leap in.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, well, at the moment, there's no reason at all for the governments of the world to make an official disclosure announcement. But I was wondering, I was thinking today, actually, if something triggered disclosure, like a fleet of extraterrestrial spacecraft showing up in the sky, it would be a very different story to that of a slowly leaked educational type, get with the program sort of disclosure that a lot of people are suggesting is actually going on now. So
Yes.
Yeah, you want to comment on that?
Okay. Yes, because it's my own personal belief or thoughts that hand in hand with a move towards disclosing to the general public that ET is here and visiting us, what goes hand in hand for that, for me at least, and I know for a lot of other people, is an essential rise in spirituality and general concern for our environment that must take place hand in hand with that. Because one of the big stumbling blocks that people talk about that they want disclosed is the technology. Where has technology been downloaded and back engineered from down to craft? Have they been supplied with technology by groups of ETs, etc.? There's been all these theories abounding for years. And so I think that there's always been with mankind a danger in how we utilize technology, and whether it's a slow progress towards disclosing the fact that they are here and visiting us or a fast one, we still need that elevation of spirituality and commitment to the environment and preserving our planet, because the technology that they may wish to share with us is such that we could very easily hijack that kind of technology and turn it into ways to have power over people on this planet, or utilize it in the wrong kind of way. So I think that we need to grow very much in spirituality before we have exposure to highly spiritual beings. Now, I know that a lot of people don't agree that necessarily the ETs are highly spiritual, but there's a very high percentage of experiencers who say that they are. And if we go on that, then how are we going to relate to them if we have this huge divide between their perspective on spirituality and ours?
Yeah. So that's sort of, so you're saying that we sort of need to get ourselves up to speed before this happens. But, things, it's so typical. And right now we've just had an experience where something happened worldwide out of the blue. So maybe a situation where we don't get any preparation time, and then we're sort of left dealing with the fallout of actually what we've just been through, really, isn't it? I was saying earlier today that, the first thing that happened with this pandemic, that there were like steps in my own reaction and other people's reactions that I could see of you know, what happened, how we responded. And the first thing for me was I wanted to get on the phone and call my friends and my family and actually speak to people rather than sending a text or something in Messenger or whatever it was, WhatsApp, whatever you used. Then I wanted to gather people together, and I created email lists and had online Zoom groups and all these sorts of things. And then I'm taking in all this information as much as possible. As you know, we've been having these conversations before. Reading from the time you wake up till you go, you know, collapsing in bed at night, you know, just gobbling up as much information as you can, and then starting to get contradictory information and creating confusion. So I can see how all of that would play out if we suddenly had a forced disclosure. Let's call it a forced disclosure as such, but where something happened, that there was a trigger where the government could not help but come forward and say, okay, well, these are ETs. Like just think back to Independence Day, where they all showed, I think all the big spaceships showed up around over the big cities on the planet, right? If something, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but just think if something like that did, not exactly the same, but like it. And so therefore the world governments, they have to start communicating with the people, and the people are going to get a warp 10 paradigm shift, right? That they don't have time for all that to happen. And then you've got this great explosion, this, you know, atomic mushroom cloud in everyone's mind about what the heck, you know, what's going on. So now it may not be that, but it may be something else. There could be, say, gosh, we've had a lot of asteroids
more leaked documents.
It could be anything like that. Yeah, they could be forced to do it, and people don't have the time to prepare for it. What happens then?
Well, if we look at the effect that it is going to have on people, I think it would be quite evenly divided. National Geographic magazine published some results of research in the States for if I can use that as an example, and they found that roughly 50% of adult Americans and roughly 60% of young Americans believed that there was life out there, you know, intelligent life out in space that may be contacting us or that exists. So if you look at it that way, then and use that as a marker, shall we say, just for discussion's sake this evening, that it could be quite evenly balanced. And so some people will not be shocked at all and may welcome it, may think, wow, this is exciting, I can deal with this. But there are always going to be those who cannot. And I think, for example, of certain religions, there will be some religions that can take this in their stride, as the Catholic Church has done, saying that they can accept the existence of extraterrestrials as part of God's plan, etc. But then there will be those who can't. And a perfect example of that is that just recently, I had a lady contact me who is a fundamentalist Christian, and who said that that she's really not happy that people are dying from the virus, but she feels that this is the beginning of the end of the world, the Armageddon or whatever, and that she felt that, you know, there was going to be an ascension, or people were going to be saved and some were not. And it was, to her, it was an exciting time that heralded the end of days. And so you're going to have these very, very divided opinions on whether this is going to be beneficial for us or whether people believe it. And then, of course, you've got conspiracy theorists, and that's a word that's being bandied around on Facebook at the moment and social media. People are not at all happy with the word conspiracy theorist, because some people being labeled conspiracy theorists are actually really good, careful, critical thinkers coming up with some excellent research. But if people don't want to listen to it, they label them conspiracy theorists, and therefore that has negative connotations for them. So, you know, then the conspiracy theorists who perhaps have not done their homework, if I can put it that way, are going to come up with all kinds of complex ideas about what is going to happen. And if you are not secure in your belief system or not secure in yourself, we're talking about psychology of mankind here, and our own personal differences and belief systems are going to come into play. So that really, in my mind, equals considerable confusion that
Very
will
much
be dealt with. And as we found with this COVID-19 situation, people don't know who to believe. They are listening to the people that they want to trust, the government or the medical profession or whatever. But there's so much hoax information out there. There's so much fake information mixed in with the valid information that it's become a minefield. And even people who are used to research and people who are quite open-minded have got into a state of confusion. And when you're in a state like that, you try to cling on to what you think is going to stabilize you. And often that is either the loudest voice or the constant in your life that might be your government.
Yeah.
So, you know, those are some of the problems that we might have in an overnight situation where a fleet of UFOs appears in the sky, or there's an announcement from a government, or a really juicy leaked document or video.
I think there would be a huge amount of questions being asked by the public and the media alike. You know, things like, how did this happen? How long has this been going on? Are we safe? Will they harm us? Where are these aliens from? Like things like, have they been here all along? How do we recognize them? I've had some strange workmates, by the way, and neighbours. Could they be aliens hiding? They sure seem different, you know, like how much control do they have? What's the government or military doing about it? Why has this been kept secret for so long? How do we know what we're being told now is the truth? Just like you said, and so on and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And I think because of all that, we wouldn't be getting the answers that we want to know, because I've sat in a few webinars now, and while they say about certain issues that are going on right now in regards to rights, I'm typing in questions in the chat box, but they're giving a how could you say, a bureaucratic presentation, and not addressing the questions at all, so which is really annoying me. But you know, so there's going to be public protests, and a lot of people wouldn't even be happy that aliens are real, right?
Yes.
That would not make them happy. The government knew about it, and that they're among us. What? Hell no. And then what if they wanted to go away, you know, and stay away from our children? You know, all those sorts of things. I could just see it just would be crazy.
Yes, and there has been, excuse me, there has been some research done into the way humans think. And this has become evident in this situation with the virus. And that is near threat or distant threat. Near presence or distant presence. And so, for example, here in New Zealand, we have been somewhat removed from some of the tragedies that have occurred with this virus, of, you know, a lot of people losing their lives and etc., and terrible situations. We've been quite fortunate in that respect. So the threat for a while was not that real to us. We were looking with a sympathetic eye, empathetic eye of what was happening overseas. But then we began to get our own cases, and the public attitude began to change very rapidly. So when it is a far threat, people tend to cope with it reasonably well, and they have time to make preparations and to think about it. But once the threat becomes close proximity or a close presence, the game really changes then. And people have to overnight decide what they trust, who they trust, what their action is going to be, whether or not they're going to cooperate, etc. And I think the same thing applies. We are quite happy worldwide to hear astrophysicists and scientists say, look, we think that there's probably biological life out there, molecular life, tiny little organisms from outer space, and we all read that in the news and think, oh yeah, that's feasible, I'm quite comfortable with that. But if that threat was, say, if that news was to have a closer presence and they said, look, meteorites are bringing in deadly viruses, then we would all be looking at the sky, we'd all be reading about meteorites, and we might all be panicking about how we're going to survive this. And so the same can be applied to the presence of extraterrestrials, of non-human intelligence in physical form, flying spacecraft. If there's something that is only a potential that's in a distance somewhere across the galaxy, we can accept that and we can watch our sci-fi movies and feel quite comfortable when we go to sleep at night. But if there was the announcement that they're actually in our atmosphere, they're flying around, and they're mixing with us, which people in the UFO field have been stating and claiming for years, but we are a minuscule representation within the population. And that's what I try to get a lot of people in the UFO field to realize. We are a minuscule number. If the announcement is made that they're actually here, then that has a very different effect on people's psychology and the way that they react to that news.
Yeah. I think too, just to add on to that, in regard to that news, I mean, we need to keep in mind that some of the intelligent life in our galaxy may be deeply alien to us, right? Their thinking patterns and sense of logic, their vast knowledge, their emotional differences, if they even have emotions, their perceptions, their social organisation, communication, etc. It may be so vastly different to that of humans that we just can't find any common ground and may not relate to alien visitors at all. And I know there's going to be some people out there who are cringing and saying, no, there's, they're all human, or they're very human, or they're all friendly, or they're very friendly. Well, that they may be the ones that you're in communication with, but they are not all the extraterrestrials in the world. So when the authorities come forward and they say that there are, I mean, we only need one type for the authorities to say there is extraterrestrial life in the universe, right? And it is here, for us to go, oh my God. But, we don't know if once that actually happens, that may somehow open the doorway for others to come, further, for more of them to show up. We really don't know. So our differences may be far too great for humanity to bear, and we may become completely intolerant of those differences. I'm sure we would.
Yes, that's an interesting perspective, and of course, if we did have the proverbial fleet appear in the sky, who is to say whether they are benign or malevolent? And if the government says they are dangerous, how many of us will automatically believe that because we feel safe and secure and we trust that we will be looked after and protected? So, we don't appear to have a good track record if we are looking at some of the videos that have come out and the voices of witnesses over the years who've talked about downed craft or craft being chased, etc., within our atmosphere. We don't know whether we'll have the proverbial red flag kind of situation where we have a threat, an alien threat, or whether or not they will be able to present themselves to us in a non-threatening way, so that open communication can take place.
Yeah, very interesting.
And that kind of leads us on to where would the current UFO field stand in all of this, if it was even left standing at all?
Yeah, exactly. What would we need to do? Anything? Would there be? Would we have a role to play? I actually don't know the answer to that, Suzy. I really don't know, because that would be such a huge thing to happen that it is almost impossible to even speculate.
Yes, I would agree with that. I mean, you and I have been in this field for well over 40 years. And we are sitting here saying we don't know what would happen in that respect, because we've got people crying out for disclosure at the present time, which we've had small snippets of things disclosed. I mean, every time someone has a UFO sighting, it is a form of disclosure. Every time somebody talks about a contact experience, it's the same.
Mm.
And in fact, even some of the sci-fi movies, which contain quite a lot of facts that are known to people within the UFO field, can be a very convincing and mind-changing kind of process for people. So my thoughts are, with the current state of the UFO field being quite divided, being very much diluted, I think, by people coming into the field from other disciplines or from New Age ways of thinking, or even religious or spiritual ways of thinking. So a lot of the research has been done over the years, both in the contact field and the sighting field, is getting diluted. We're hearing less and less of that really in-depth critical thinking kind of information, and we're seeing much more speculation, and it's like an open slather that you can make any claim that you like and someone out there is going to believe it, and you don't have to really produce anything to back up what you're saying. Which has always been something I have attempted to do, because I think it's important. So really we're looking at political, spiritual, social and environmental change in a major way if an announcement was made that publicly that they are here.
Yeah.
In terms of the UFO field, I think that at this point in time we have no direction, but we have 1,000 directions. The field now is divided into so many subjects, subtitles really, that there's no central focus anymore, apart from perhaps the desire for some disclosure from various governments, which has taken place to a certain extent. So if something happened whereby we were told that they are officially that they are here, what role would the UFO field then play in that? Would we simply be left in the dust by science and by the military and by political ventures? Would we just be totally superfluous after years and years of research? Would we not be included in the grand plan at all, because we are so divided, and really we've become quite insular in that in many respects we preach to each other, and there's not so much preaching outside of the UFO field to the general public?
Well, actually, if some of those extraterrestrials who did show up were not too great, didn't have our best interests in mind, and I'm sure a lot of them would come with their own agenda, then I might be making some of that dust myself as I get it.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right, because you know, a lot of people in the UFO field make a lot of claims, and I mean, people could say the same about me. I've written a book about my experiences, but I have always endeavoured for the last 40 years to search for corroborative evidence, and I think that the speeches I do on alien technology that I have seen, which has been backed up by people I don't even know, who produced and wrote about the same material years ago and drew pictures the same as mine, that's a good start. It's not what many people would accept as evidence, but it's the closest that they're going to get at the moment, I think, is that kind of corroboration. But yes, is the UFO field even going to be a desirable place to be? should this disclosure that everyone in the UFO field wants, should it take place? Are we going to be in the wrong place at the wrong time?
I think all I can say to that is I might be feeling a little bit smug.
While running as fast as you can.
In front of all those people who said, oh, you know, they're not real, all those sorts of things. All the, not so much these days, but in times gone past, all the ridicule that, you know, I've been surrounded by, and even a bit, you know, hanging back about talking about the subject with the people that I knew, and they sort of, you know, glaze over or go, and you could tell that they're seeing you in a different light and it's not so great, you know, that all that sort of stuff. And I hate that. I really hate that. But, you know, that's the sort of thing that happens. But I wanted to go back and pick up on something you touched on before. You talked about, I think you touched on religion. And I was wondering, like, you know, what sort of consequences disclosure might have for our religious ideas and institutions. And given that some contactees over the years have claimed that they've been told by ETs that if the ET said to them, if they came to Earth, humans would call them gods and they'd be revered. And ancient alien theorists think this is definitely embedded in our history. So what might we then see the creation of new religious groups with ETs as the Godhead?
Yes, well, I was just reading today that it, certainly in the States there's this prediction amongst many people that UFOs could become the new religion. Basically, it would create such an upswing of interest in so many people, but in many religious groups, as I said before, some will be quite capable and quite comfortable about accepting that as a part of God's plan or whatever, and that then there will just be the cult-like attitude towards it, where it will become a religion of sorts in a cult-like fashion. And it brings to mind, I think it was Independence Day, where the hippies are up on top of the building crying out to the UFO as it comes up and worshipping it, and it stopped over the top of them, and they thought that they were going to be either beamed up and taken somewhere pleasant or whatever, and the UFO fired on them and blew the top off the building. So, you know, that's a bit crass, but it is an example of that cult-like reverence that many people are capable of, and we've seen that many times in the past with UFO cults and religions that have developed and have ended very badly with the loss of people's lives. So, you know, how is the information going to get out? What information would get out there quickly? Who would put information out there? If the governments have been withholding information for years, are they going to be the ones who quickly put it out there? Because everybody's going to say, well, why didn't you do this before? So who would be called upon to quell the masses or to provide information? Is it going to be the military? Well, their hands would be tied in the same way that governments would be. Would it be the UFO field? Would we have a rush of people wanting to put their hand up to be the one to lead the way and inform the public? Would it be the scientists? Would it be the astrophysicists and the astronomers? You know, where does this information, imparting of information at such a time, where would it come from, and who would we trust the most? And these are the questions that I think have not even been adequately discussed in the UFO field, let alone in the general public.
Yes, that is a good point, because this sort of conversation, I rarely hear anyone talking about these things. And I think that's really sad, because, you know, we've been so focused on the sightings and the close encounters, which naturally, of course, we are. That gives the basis, the foundation for the subject. But, you know, we don't really talk about, well, how do we feel about this? You know, do we like it? We do have differences of opinion on that, but, you know, how do we feel about it? And what's it going to look like in the future? You know, what does the reality of extraterrestrial existence, how does that affect our civilization? How does that affect each culture like you were saying before, the whole social structure, you know, what's the response going to be and how do we cope with it? Because I don't think, someone said when I posted this on the Facebook page that disclosure will never happen, but I thought to myself, yeah, maybe not in our lifetime, but eventually I think it will, because and look, that could take 50 years, that could take 5 years, 50 years, it could take 5,000 years, I don't know. But I think eventually that will happen, because Earth is a great resource. And there's a good reason to come here, because there are a lot of resources that can be used by other civilizations, you know, as a stopover, as a refueling place, to pick up, you know, all sorts of types of food, you know, plants that they can then grow and go and hybridize, and all. They don't just hybridize people; they hybridize all sorts of things, you know. So there's a great resource here. So I think that some extraterrestrials are here, and they're doing that already. But if our government came out and said, you know, that they're here, that this is real, then that might shift a whole lot of things, and some of these extraterrestrial races might then feel that the door is open, and there may be negotiations for trade and all sorts of things that is out in the open, not hidden away in secret.
Well, just picking up on a couple of things there. Thinking about experiences, and many experiences can describe what it is like to stand in front of an ET. And so that it can be amazing, it can also be very daunting. And for some people it can be frightening. And so I think that they are so far advanced, well, certainly the ones that many experiencers describe here, the ones that have been met on this planet, that would be very daunting for the majority of the public. And I think we have got a long way to go before we can have any kind of open conversation with them. And so I agree with you that this could take a very long time. And I think that the groundwork that many of us in the UFO field are doing is actually is a foundation upon which much more can be based as the years go by. And I don't, as you said, you know, there could be something that happens quite suddenly that causes people to consider the fact that they're here. But in the meantime, it has already taken decades for us to, for humanity to acclimatize themselves to the idea of extraterrestrials. And if we look back at some of the early contactees in the late 50s and 60s and 70s, leading on to the abductees and then the experiencers, it's taken decades for those people to come forward and be brave enough to share what they have encountered. So, and even that has not been picked up on by the vast majority of humanity, who think it's, in many ways, that it's a joke. So I do think that the longer it takes, actually, the better, that there's a generalized education and familiarization program taking place. We can see evidence of this even by governments and military, even though, you know, proponents of disclosure don't like the fact that it hasn't happened already. I can see the sense in some things that are taking place. What concerns me, though, is that many experiencers, including myself and the likes of Robert Salas and others, talk about, and some whistleblowers talk about the ET's concern over our warlike tendencies and our use of atomic or nuclear weapons. So that in itself is a major, and purely speculating, if we were to get to the stage on this planet where there was the threat of a nuclear war, then I think that we could easily see the appearance of ETs again, as happened at Malmstrom Air Force Base with Robert Salas, and other bases where there has been some interference in our technology by a UFO to give us a message and to prevent missiles, etc., from operating as they should do.
Yeah, I'll just let people know we'll get to your questions shortly. We'll get a few of those out. But I was just going to touch on the technology, Suzy, because you've gone a long way in looking for examples of technology that are coming to the fore on planet Earth that you've actually seen on spaceships, basically. So I'm wondering, do you think that disclosure could provide an avenue for the hidden ET technology that has previously been reverse engineered to then come to the light? You know, things that have not been able to be released into the public domain without a lot of questions being asked, they may suddenly emerge.
That's definitely a possibility. It's disappointing that some of it hasn't emerged before now, and it's disappointing that some of the technology that I have seen ETs using, sound technology as a form of control, and of humans, and I don't use the word control in a negative sense. I mean used to assist the humans to be taken on board or whatever in a very timely and quickly manner that protects them from harm or whatever. But we're seeing this now being developed to put sounds or voices into people's heads. So point and shoot technology that's being developed to target a single person in a crowd of thousands and to influence them in some way. So we are already seeing technology that is possibly ET related being used in a negative way. The potential though for being able to develop with their assistance very positive technology for health and healing and the environment, etc., the potential is enormous. And I agree with you that some of that technology that's been obtained from perhaps back-engineered craft or association with ET groups face-to-face on the planet in secret, that may have been developed for the very reason you stated, that they don't want people to know that they've got their hands on it and they haven't been telling us about it. And that could be one of the reasons why people like myself who speaks on alien technology have had their life threatened and been intimidated, because they don't want us talking about what there is and making that link to technology that's already being developed by us. And as I had some scientists and medical people come forward and offer me their information, that was proof to me that that could easily be the case. So, you know, I think that one of the words that springs to mind if this sort of situation arose where there is a disclosure of sorts or something in the sky that causes this disclosure, I think there will, the word that springs to mind will be anger. There will be a lot of anger that will have to be dealt with. People will want to know why they weren't told sooner, and they'll want to know what is happening and how long people have known about it. I believe it would have a chaotic effect on the world. I know there's a lot of people within the UFO field who have argued with me about that and have said, no, we'd be fine with it. Yes, well, polls show that 50% of us may be fine, but the rest would not. And what do we do about that?
Yeah.
Are we planning for that?
Yeah. If you're just joining us, Suzy and I are talking about alien disclosure and what might happen from that point on, if that were to come into effect. But let's go to some of the questions that people are asking. I'm just going to go to one here from Deb. Are you aware of any existing government protocols to handle disclosure or protocols to handle an overt ET visit or invasion? I heard that the UN has something in place, and I've also been told by a former member of the Navy that they have such protocols in place. Surely that a lot of UFO reports have come from commercial pilots, for instance. There are protocols already in place. Do you want to comment on that? Or?
Well, certainly in some countries in South America, there are protocols in place that allow people to report such things freely. So CEFAA in Chile freely investigates pilot sightings and military sightings, etc., as do some of the other countries in South America. So there are very differing attitudes by military and governments worldwide towards the ET presence and the documentation of military and pilot, what would you call it, contact with them. But unfortunately, the world tends to hear the most about the American situation. We tend to be flooded with information about attempts at disclosure and military and governmental issues, when the rest of the world is also experiencing things and also making steps towards investigating it. There are other countries actually investigating it. So yes, I have heard of other investigations taking place throughout the world and preparations being done.
Yes, absolutely, me too. Yeah. What was just fade out? One here from Jane. Our personal faith really needs to be there. Why would people from other planets existing change that? Same God for all of us, no matter what we call him. I think, Jane, that depends on your own your perspective, really, and your own belief system, really. Yeah, I'm not really sure about that. Have you got any thoughts on that, Suzy? Whether extraterrestrials would change an individual's personal beliefs, or?
Well, I guess it depends in some respects how secure your beliefs are, your reasons for having those beliefs, and indeed even the kind of whatever church or religion you follow.
Yeah.
Because some are much more kind of militant and fundamental than others. Some are very tolerant and open, and others are much more closed in their perspectives. So I think basically if it came down to deciding how you feel about the news that there's an ET presence, I think it will come down eventually to the individual. There may be some religious groups that try to control what their flock is thinking, but you know, I've seen a lot of people over the years have come to me who have been from religious backgrounds reporting UFO sightings in New Zealand, and it has caused a quandary for them between their religious or spiritual belief system and what they saw and what they witnessed, and how members of their church or their religion treated them when they disclosed it. So I've seen some very good and positive things happen that has opened up discussion in their churches, and in other cases it's been extremely destructive to the person and they've left that religious belief system. I think it will come down to individual choice.
Yeah, no, I think it'll also depend on the system that you follow, I guess, or religion that you follow. Like some might see the landing of UFOs en masse, if they came down here and did that, as a sign of the impending turn of Christ or the approaching Armageddon. It just depends which way you want to look at. But if nothing else, I think disclosure would call into question the argument of humanity being uniquely created by God. You know, some fundamentalist religions would be challenged and would refute ETs as being anything but from God. You know, so it just depends on the particular group. I know, for example, the Mormons, they're quite open to the idea of other life in the universe.
That's right. Yeah.
So whereas
and the Vatican owns many observatories. Yeah.
Whereas a group, Jehovah's Witnesses, they are not. You know, they're not open to that. Well, they never used to be. I don't know what they think now. They do evolve too. So yeah, I mean, wow. I mean, there could be new religions that emerge, and
religions and cults.
Yeah, but you know, they could have like a new cosmotheology or global cosmic ethic might arise.
Yes, well, that's right. A peaceful environmental and peaceful relations following, if you want to put it that way. I hesitate to use the word religion, but a group or foundation. That works towards positive, like some aspects of exopolitics, working towards a structure of communication in a peaceful sense.
Yeah, there could be like a powerful secular movement of altruistic service to the universe and its long-term flourishing. Many contactees have reported that some ET civilizations live within a strong community where, you know, people no longer work for money but contribute for the benefit of all. Suddenly we report something more akin to a utopian lifestyle that's deeply spiritual. You know, there's, I don't know, it's all sorts of things could happen. I think what I do think is a lot of things that we could not foresee would happen, that's for sure.
Yes, yeah.
And that would,
situation now.
Yeah, and there, yeah, exactly. And you know, the impact on our social organisation, you know, the transformation of human society, goodness knows where that would take us. But anyway, let's go on to another, what have we got here? We've got the entire UFO phenomenon, along with its covert nature, is a result of collaboration between an alien presence on this earth and a secret cartel of very powerful people within governments. It will take a few more generations when our technologies are greater at detection to force disclosure. I think that would be Derek saying that. Yeah, I agree, Derek. It's going to take a while, I think. Any comments on that, Suzy?
No, I've got a bit of sound quality problem and I missed the first part of it.
Oh, okay, rightio, all right. What else have we got here? Looking for some more that aren't the same. We'll keep going anyway. So we've covered religion and technology. Business and industry would definitely change, that's for sure, I think.
The biggest plus for us, I think, if ET was to come and begin sharing more with us, would have to be the environment, because without that we're not going to survive anyway. So you know, that's the greatest issue alongside spirituality. You know, I know that some of the technology they have is frequency related. So there is some technology where if you have a great deal of negativity about you, is probably the most human way I can describe it. You won't be able to operate that technology. So this is why I say frequently that the ETs have said we are quite retrograde backward in our spirituality, and for us to reach that bridge situation where we can reach out and meet at a halfway point with them, we need to advance in our spirituality and our attitudes. Everything about our planet at the moment, and I'm not saying this in a terribly negative sense, because there are wonderful things on our planet, there's wonderful technology, there's wonderful things happening in the environment, but the vast majority of what is harming us is shocking, and that's what needs to be addressed. And unless we develop a stronger spirituality and sense of our place within nature on the planet, I think we have assumed too high a position of importance for ourselves on the planet in terms of our place in nature. I think nature has a great deal to teach us, and it has been teaching us that in recent weeks while we've been in lockdown, and we have seen animals and birds and the skies and nature behaving differently just in that very short space of time. And if that isn't a very big message to us, then we've really lost the plot, and we haven't been watching in the last few weeks what is happening to our home, to our planet.
Yes, exactly. And actually it's put us on, you know, giving us another perspective too, that you know, we had become the threatened species. You know, how do we feel about that? You know, like the shoes on the other foot now. Well, how it was initially, and it still is. So yeah, it's a bit of I hope a lot of people are learning things from this, but there's so many things that we are learning that we can apply to the UFO field, to what we're talking about in regard to after disclosure, what then? So we're really talking about, we've been talking about generally what happens initially and then from then on, but what about the long-term effects? Like, after we get through all that, and like, I'm a bit of a futurist. I like to dream about the future and where things could go, and what potentials there are, and what problems could arise too, of course. So in business and industry, we could learn about new processes which then create new products. Imagine if we could broaden our trade market to include ETs, for example. Imagine the Earth's resources that may not be found on other planets, those sorts of things. If we had disclosure, we had extraterrestrial trade set up, imagine the things that we might then be able to have access to if that trade was working.
Well, if we just look at the medical side, I talk in my speeches about some of the medical technology I've seen on craft, and if that was applied to humanity and we had access to that kind of technology, then we would live longer lives and we would be healthier. So the whole health system as it is, which is stretched worldwide, and there's so many people not being able to have access to good health and well-being, if that all changed and we were living longer, that in itself would completely change the face of humanity. And there would be so many other flow-ons and effects and changes that would have to arise because of that longevity and better health and better health. And so many more people would be more productive much longer, and they would be able to work longer or have recreation. So yeah, the changes that could potentially occur in society, in our civilization, are mind-boggling. But at some stage, very soon after this potential announcement that we're, fictitious announcement that we're talking about that could happen, there would have to be governance and leadership of some sort, and that would be something that that in itself would create conflict, perhaps, because that governance would have to be fair and equitable, and it would have to be trustworthy. And where would we get that leadership from in each country, and what would it entail? Would it be, as I said before, the military, the government, the medical profession, or whatever? How would we put that into effect?
Yeah.
To deal with the problems. And of course, there's a big difference between a fleet of UFOs appearing in the sky and showing us that they're there, and them actually landing somewhere and trying to make a face-to-face contact. That would be a step forward again that we haven't really considered, and that's where this preparation and governance and leadership would have to come into play.
Yeah, while you're talking, I'm sort of down the track, like, I don't know, 500 years. And I'm thinking about politics. I'm just thinking about Sunday morning news shows that include politicians with strong views on galactic politics and what it all means. I mean, just the very thought of that is it's funny.
Yes, that's the futurist in you. I can see there's going to be a big reincarnation coming up for you, Sheryl.
maybe. Or what about like a broader legal system that moves us towards cosmic or universal laws, those sort of things?
Yes. The education system, legal system, medical system, all of those would eventually be overhauled. Just even if it was just through the potential that they might come down and land, that we've actually seen something, that it's been made public, etc. There's been a fleet in the sky over the government buildings or whatever. The potential changes are huge, and I'm sure there's some discussion going on somewhere about it, but it's not really being evident in the public eye, because the reality of them visiting us already has not sunk home. The most interesting, just and a little aside here, is that the public speaking that I do in New Zealand, I find the most interesting groups to talk to are right outside of the UFO groups, UFO interests or spiritual interests. And for example, I spoke at a rest home come retirement village, and at their coffee morning some years ago, and they usually got about 30 people coming along, a very large village, retirement village. Usually got about 30 people coming along for coffee and listening to a speaker for 20 minutes. And they stepped out of their comfort zone and asked me to come and talk about UFOs. And there were 98 people turned up from within that village. And after 20 minutes, they said, no, keep talking. And after an hour and a half, some little minibuses had pulled up outside to take some of them on visits and shopping and places. And the minibuses had to sit there while the question time carried on. So you can see that there is this level of interest there outside of the UFO field that is often not tapped by the UFO field itself. We've become very insular, and I think that we need to change that, and actually go out there and talk to people and be brave enough to talk to those who might ask you the hard questions, and not speaking to the converted all the time and saying what people want to hear for popularity or ego or whatever, is to actually go out there and do the hard work of talking to those who are the non-converted, but at the same time maybe quite interested.
Yeah. I've spoken to quite a variety of groups over the years, school groups, which I have to tell you, there was one particular time I spoke where this little boy said from the audience, from this group, said, "That's a lie." And I thought, what was he, all of 8? Like, how would he have even known that? I thought that's his parents talking, or one of them, probably dad. I don't know. I don't want to give men a bad name, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to, oh my gosh, I've spoken to real estate groups and.
Excuse me, can I interrupt here? What was your response?
I can't remember. It was so long ago. Of course, it was very diplomatic being a child. Especially with the teacher standing there. But
you weren't doing that runaway act, were you, in the dust?
No, I never run away from hard questions. I love hard questions.
Me too.
Yeah, and you know, my philosophy with children has been, if they're asking questions, they should be given answers, you know, to their level, right? But give them the answers that they're asking, because they actually are asking. But you know, I spoke a few years ago to a men's group up at Mount Tambourines, just south of Brisbane. Gosh, I can't remember how many men. I was the only woman in the room, and I was the speaker. That was very interesting. But you know, they were very respectful, and some of them were retired pilots and all sorts of people. You know, like, there is a big interest in the UFO subject in the public. I'm just trying to think who else I've spoken to. There's been a few, spiritual churches, of course. National seniors, aged care groups, old people's homes, those sorts of things. Yes, and there's a big interest. And I actually, the times I really enjoy speaking to the public is when one sole person will come up right at the very end when a lot of people have left and say, "Thank you for that. You've really changed the way I think about things." That's really satisfying to hear that from someone.
Yeah.
Because they hadn't heard that information before. They hadn't, and this is the problem, getting the information out to the public, and not just the interested UFO community, but getting beyond that. And I've spoken to various library groups too. They're always quite interested.
Yes, and in doing so, bypassing the media, and some media are fantastic to work with, but others are not. And whenever you're interviewed, you have no idea how it's going to be conveyed, and that's a danger.
Yeah. Well,
so we're getting a bit off topic here.
Yes, let's get back on topic. My futuristic mind is still ticking over, and I'm thinking, like, talking about the media. That's what got me onto that. Talking to the public and all that sort of stuff. You know, after disclosure, you could see the media be blazing with first-person interviews and insider stories of new arrivals from planet X, Y, and Z. I mean, I could just see that happening, couldn't you?
Yes, and that's what I'm saying, that, you know, there'll be lots of people willing to jump into the void and be the voice of authority, or the voice of you know, I know I've been on a spacecraft, etc., who might appear out of nowhere. So, you know, these are pitfalls and dangers that are going to arise. It's just part of human nature. But that setting up of a structure and a governance of some kind of leadership, and it has to be something that has objectivity and critical thinking and integrity. So you know, this is an issue that's a big one for the UFO field to consider.
Yeah.
How to best represent information to the public at a time like that, and would we fall back on our very good in-depth research that is being reviled by many in the community and in the UFO community and criticized? You know, we've got this nuts and bolts attitude that's been going on for years, when in fact much of the nuts and bolts research that's been done over the years is fantastic. What kind of agenda is at play within the UFO field to say demeaning things about that? Is this, you know, a deliberate thing that is happening to divide the field and dilute the real research and information?
Yeah.
You know, we see a lot of, as I said, New Age influences coming in that are diluting that solid research.
I was just thinking too that if we want to sort of speculate about after disclosure, what then, you could sort of look at historical precedents to give us a basis for forecasting of the human response to alien contact. You know, there's been lots of cultures that have been like the Native American culture, for example, and when the Europeans came into America, and what happened to the Native Americans. The same with the Mesoamericans, and when the Spanish arrived, in, you know, those sorts of things. I'm trying to think about when Europeans came here, and what happened to the Aboriginal people, for example. It seems that and I'm just thinking that even if some of these extraterrestrials, say if some of them showed up on our door and triggered a disclosure event, once they're here, and if our government's opened up to, you know, creating relations with them, I wonder how our culture would withstand, or would it remain strong, you know, or would it sort of bend under the influence of a different culture, and perhaps the human culture as we know it may become decimated, whether planned or unplanned. You know, what would happen to it?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. You know, we would be looking to see what our similarities are with the visiting culture. Would be probably the first step that we would need to take, and what their agenda or what their purpose is. And of course, there's no guarantee that you might find that out clearly either. But yes, faced with, if these preparations are not done now, as we have been doing for decades, to familiarize people and give the soft disclosure approach, then it's entirely possible that culture shock would be so great that it would destroy a lot of people and create fear and chaos. The slow familiarity with the subject is probably the best way to go.
I'm just reading a comment here from Jane saying, I think it will be like exposing pedophiles in large institutions and abductees / experiencers will take out a class action suing governments and media. Could be why they're holding back on disclosure. That's an interesting thought, Jane.
That is a very interesting point. Yes, that's
Yeah.
one we haven't touched on. It's very,
Yes.
very, very correct. That these things will take place. I mean, we've got people taking class actions now to do with COVID-19, and the same thing could happen. A lot of the MyLabs and things that have happened, you know, very negative and traumatic abduction experiences that have happened over the years that people claim are MyLab related. That's certainly a case to be considered.
Yeah, yeah. I think talking through all this, disclosure is about change. And as a collective, change is something that humans don't do very well. And they're creakingly slow at it usually, unless something happens to make them change.
Or there's a reward for changing.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Or they could even be coerced, as we are seeing today. What's going on, right? There's a lot of coercion going on right at the moment with this pandemic. But anyway, let's not get off track. But someone suggested to me years ago that, we're never really prepared for change in life, like divorce, illness, death of a loved one, etc. And I think she's right. We're usually not prepared for these things when they happen, and basically life's like that, isn't it? Unexpected and challenging. So some cope well with change, others do not. But maybe what do you think if there are some ways that we can set ourselves up better to cope with that change in regard to disclosure of VTs?
Yeah, I think that's a difficult one because it depends on whether the visiting ETs at the time that might appear in our sky or land on the White House lawn or whatever. It depends whether they are, positive or negative in nature and in their intentions. So that's, this. Your question illustrates the dilemma that we have, and how do we prepare for something like this? And when we all react individually according to our background, our upbringing, our childhood, what we've been conditioned in our behavior to do, and then you add to that all of the other elements that we attach as we grow up, like religions or belief systems, etc., then it becomes a task that is quite mind-boggling in its complexity.
I like to tell a little story. Back in 1992, we organised a Skywatch at Ivanhoe Dam. And before we went, there ended up being 27 people attending. And before we went, some of us decided we were going to focus on calling in. I mean, we're already doing CE5 before CE5 even existed, right? This is 92. Well, we were just hearing about it anyway. So we decided to sort of put out this idea that we'd like to make contact, blah, blah, blah. So we rocked up to the Ivanhoe Dam the following weekend. And 3 o'clock in the morning, we all saw something. Well, not all of us, sorry. 8 of us were woken up out of our sleep and dragged over to the edge of the water. And we saw these 3 orange football-shaped objects, which were quite large, not huge, but they would have been like as big as a table, I'm guessing, in real size. And they were sort of like the colour of an ember if you blow on it from a fire, something like that. And anyway, they came down over the water. And so as I'm running down to the water, the first thing, I'm looking at the water, so I see the reflection of these things on the water. So they weren't that high, and they're probably only about, I think about 300 metres away, maybe a little less. I'm not really sure now, but and what was really interesting was the next day, because it was everyone's who saw it. There were 8 of us who saw it. Everyone's response to what they had seen. Now, someone immediately said, "It's a hoax. It's a hoax. It's a hoax. It's a hoax. It's a hoax," and that's all we heard from that person for the rest of the day, right? Other people are going, "Oh my God, this is a sign. This is a sign." I mean, these are UFO people, for goodness sake. They weren't remaining objective. They weren't remaining doing any sort of critical analysis because of the proximity of what we saw,
yep,
the unusualness of it, and that we all saw it, right? So it happened, but then it was all about our interpretation of what happened. And I was just sitting back, just watching people play out their response to what they had seen. And I thought it was very, very interesting.
Yes, and that's a good little story, and I'll just kind of add to it a little bit. My mind's gone blank. Hang on, I'll have to drag it back again. Yes, how people respond to that situation. And there's that, what I talked about before, the close proximity. So it's all right to think about something that's out there in the universe that we might see or make contact with one day in the future. But when it comes in over the lake in front of you and it's at close proximity, all of your critical thinking, everything goes out the window, and you revert to some kind of core behavior that's been sitting quietly inside you all of these years that just bursts out, and you lose all sense of judgment even. And this is where this slow process of disclosure is really important from my belief. Because when I had a missing time experience in 1975 with my flatmate in a car on a country road, he was had a science degree, was very scientific minded, and did not believe anything to do with paranormal or UFOs. It was all rubbish. It wasn't scientific. But it wasn't part of his childhood or his belief system or his experience. But in childhood, I had seen with my family and neighbours a UFO that could not be explained in natural phenomenon terms or misidentified aircraft. It was a UFO, and it was reported in the New Zealand newspaper. Hundreds of people saw it, and it changed my life and my perspective. And from that time on, it was accepted in my mind that something was flying that, and it must have come from somewhere else, not our planet. So it was in my consciousness to think beyond the ordinary panic. So when we saw this light appearing and disappearing and eventually swallowing up our car and lifting it off the road, it was frightening at that time. Then there was this period of missing time, and the next minute we're put back down on the road, it's pitch black, it's dark, time has gone by. And although there was that same traumatic feeling, post-traumatic stress, and your palms are sweating, your mouth's gone dry, you can't talk properly, you're shaking, I was still able to think differently about the situation and probably more clearly about the situation than he was. He was completely confounded and blown to pieces by what he'd seen, and he did not want to accept it or admit it or acknowledge it or anything else. And that went on for weeks. Whereas I was trying to understand it in the terms of something that was not paranormal, not ball lightning, and wasn't an aircraft. It took us off the ground. It caused missing time. So here's this slow process that I had gone through from the age of 8 up to the age of 20 of reading and talking and believing and seeing, and it's got deeper and deeper into my understanding and consciousness. So I dealt with it better, I think. So there's another example of this knee-jerk reaction that many of humanity may have.
Yeah. I'm just having a look at a comment from Tim. Well, it shows how our fears can take different shapes. The goal is to get past them and maybe just send a friendly thought and a smile. Well, you know, that's a good thought, Tim. I like that, and I know you, so I know where you're coming from. But you know, some fears just help to keep you secure too, so they're not all bad.
And some fears help you to drive you to investigate something more, to understand it and lose the fear.
Yes, exactly. I'm just having a look at some other comments here. Here we are. From Deborah. That gives you an idea of what diversity of response disclosure will immediately have, yep, on any sample of people. That's exactly right. I'm bypassing all the pandemic comments, people, because we're not here to talk about that, although we can extrapolate from that. So this is a good idea to a good time not to talk about that, or vaccines or any of the other things, because, and this is another thing I think, it's so easy to get distracted from a conversation like this. And I see that in the UFO field all the time, that people don't stay focused with it because, one, you know, you don't know what's going to happen, right? It's guesswork. And I get that, I understand that, but I think it's really important to have these conversations, to get people thinking, you know, to mobilize the energy in them to perhaps even face the world differently, you know. This is a very different sort of conversation.
Yeah, and it all comes back to how in our environment, our worldview has been shaped.
Yeah.
How it has been shaped throughout our lives, what were the influencing factors, and whether or not we have to relearn some things. And I think there's a lot of things happening in the UFO field at the moment, a lot of claims and theories that are being presented as fact that are only theories, not facts, that will have to be relearnt by people in the future, I think, when we kind of come back down to earth and go through what the ETs described as the time of examination. When the field will be, information will be laid open and people will want to know about it. And this, of course, is probably going to follow an event on the planet which precipitates this kind of investigation into the subject. It could be something very, very visible in the sky that shakes us all up, or it could be a statement by government or military.
Yeah. And I also think that people who have experiences, you know, my thing is, if you can't sit and listen to the people who are having experiences, then you don't deserve to talk to aliens. You know, because if you can't talk to those people, how on earth are you going to communicate with extraterrestrials, right?
Absolutely, yep.
So, and you know, I've spent many hundreds and I won't even go on, hours on the phone with people and face to face, but
me too.
a lot on the phone from all over Australia with people who are telling me incredible stories. And they're looking for someone to talk to. And they, you know, I would say out of the thousands that I've spoken to over 32 years, that there would just be this many who are making it up, trying to get some attention. They're just trying to get answers. They're confused. They don't know, you know, why is it happening to me? There's always the big question, why me? And what's going on, you know, and they feel alone. So I think we have to give those people a platform.
Yes, and I think that there are things happening on the planet at the moment that are prompting the kind of thing you're talking about, where people are wanting to come forward and talk about their experiences and be heard. And for example, the SpaceX satellites going over has created a stir worldwide and caused a lot of, you know, UFO reports of people thinking that it's a massive craft going over. In fact, it's a satellite string. But it has had some very positive flow-on effects, and I had a call from an elderly lady who talked to me about a phenomenal sighting she and her husband had decades ago here in New Zealand. And it was only because they saw the satellite string going over that she decided that she would be brave enough to ring someone and tell them about it. They'd never spoken to anyone. They made a pact. They knew that other family members would not believe it or judge them for it, and so they kept silent about it for years. And she decided that before she left this planet, she would like to talk about it. So, you know, in my book, I talked about how I felt that at this time, over the next few years, there'll be a lot of people in the older age group coming forward and talking about their experiences, and that that many of them will be, you know, just ordinary good people who've had long lives and families and jobs. And when they come out with their experiences, it's going to have a great ripple effect of their family and friends around them. this in itself is a form of disclosure as well.
Yeah. So we've got 4 minutes left. Have you got any final thoughts?
Ooh. Well, yes, I will just simply make a statement about what I see happening in the UFO field, and this relates to disclosure in that I've been contacted by a lot of experiencers, and some of them are prominent experiencers in that they have written books or speak publicly at conferences, etc. And I'm not going to name them, but quite a number of them have been talking to me over a period of time and don't feel that they belong anymore in the UFO field or in the UFO fraternity, and are turning to other areas and other interests in their life, either in the environment or writing different kinds of books, or doing other things for the planet with animals or whatever, rather than continue in the UFO field, because they feel that it lacks direction, it lacks integrity and leadership, and I tend to agree with that and have considered doing that myself. So I feel that I don't hold out a lot of hope for the direction of the UFO field surviving something like disclosure. I think that there are probably, I know for a fact from having talked to them myself, that there are a lot of scientists quietly interested in the UFO field and quietly working behind the scenes. And I think these are the people who will probably come forward should some big disclosure thing happen, and will take the lead. And I think that the UFO field runs the risk at the moment of just fading away. And by that I don't mean experiencers, I just mean that there are facets of the field that will just come to a halt. But the experiencers will still be there. I believe that there are many experiencers who are very committed to their work and will ride it out and be there to speak to the public if necessary, or provide information, or cooperate in some way towards a peaceful resolution to what may be a frightening prospect to and worldview shattering or shaping prospect for many people.
Well, maybe those aspects that disappear, maybe that's not a bad thing. I certainly think that we are in a place now where people are looking for a different direction in their lives, but also in the things that interest them deeply. And they're reevaluating, the importance of things that they will spend their time in. That
their usefulness and their contribution is really coming to the fore. People want to be useful to the planet and to our future, and I think that's a marvelous positive thing that is coming to the fore, not only in terms of future contact, but also even, it is coming to the fore with this virus situation. Which is kind of a dummy run in many ways for the kinds of things that we're talking about as well. Exactly.
And when those things disappear, new things will arise. I have no doubt that they won't, because that's just the nature of how things evolve. They adapt, they move.
I agree.
So Suzy, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's 8:30, so we've got to wind it up. Thank you everyone for joining us too with all your comments. I really appreciate that, and I really like that comment, Chris. Speak your truth softly. Those who care will listen. That's great. I agree with that. So I know it's, what is it, 10:30 for you now? So
it is, yes.
It's getting late for you. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sheryl. You're welcome, and all the best to your listeners there. And you know, we're doing okay.
Yeah. Well. Yeah. Great. All right, everyone. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned. I just need to also remind you that we do have our monthly public meeting coming up online, but it will be for members only. So if you aren't a member now and you'd like to attend, head over to our website and click on join and become a member. And for your membership, it's $35 for a year, and you get a subscription to our bi-monthly journal UFO Encounter, which arrives in your inbox every 2 months, and also free access to these online meetings. Okay, so, and we'll have a guest speaker at the one coming up at the end of the month, which I think is about the 29th or so. I don't know, it's the last Friday of the month, whatever it is. So, and if you want to contact Suzy, head over to her website. Give us the web address, Suzy.
I've got www.ufocusnz.org.nz or communicatorlink.com.
Right,
that's the contact website, which I'm just building at the moment. So that's under construction.
And they can contact you on your Facebook page too.
Yes, they can. Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye, Suzy.
Bye.